So I'm going to start right off by saying that I'm going to be taking some time off after this session. And if you write to me, then I will let you know when I'm going to resume. So I'm going to just get started in honor of the time. So this is our third session on surrendering the mind and its desires to Baba. And we're going to finish up on the ego today. We spent a lot of time on the ego last time, but we didn't get to the most amazing part, which is, it's called part 3, the forms of the ego and their dissolution in discourses, as well as a few quotes from the chapter called The Dynamics of Spiritual Advancement. And this material that I'm going to share with you, this is what we have because of being with Baba, but many psychologists and Jungians don't have this. And it's really all about how to give our egos to Baba and become his slave. And anyway, I'll read some quotes on it. And then what we're going to do today that's a little bit different is we are going to have a discussion. I'm going to open it up for comments after I present the material on the ego from Baba. And then we're going to go into the anima and the animus, which is the third major archetype that Jung outlined. And then we'll have a discussion on that at the end, because they're two quite different subjects, the ego and then the anima animus. So we know that the ego was his first major archetype, and then the shadow was the second one. And now to this week, we'll work on the anima and the animus. And so in this material that I'm going to share with you now, it's about how we have a new nucleus of integration with our provisional ego subservient to the master. And again, I feel like this is going to be the key awakening material over the next hundreds of years for those who are really interested in psychology, because I mean, Baba's chapters on the ego are just so profound. And we know that he's not widely known until 100 years after he drops his body. So we're just so fortunate. So anyway, I'm going to just start out and read you a few quotes from the discourses. The ego lives through the idea of mine. So in spite of all the worldly things that it claims as mine, it constantly feels empty and incomplete. The ego wants to feel separate and unique. And I'm just reading you little tidbits from here and there, but you can go to your discourses and fill it in. It's just beautiful. Baba says the balance between the I and the you is constantly disturbed by the predominance of a superiority or inferiority complex. The idea of equality arises to restore this lost balance. The negative assertion of the ego in the form of equality is, however, utterly different from the sense of unity that is characteristic of the life of spiritual freedom. So although the sense of equality is made the basis of many social and political ideals, the real conditions of rich cooperative life are fulfilled only when the bare idea of equality is replaced by the realization of the unity of all life. So the feelings of superiority and inferiority are reactions to each other, and the artificially induced feeling of equality might be regarded as a reaction to both. In all these three modes, the ego succeeds in asserting its separateness. And I just think this is so profound, because we do see, as Baba said, that our social justice programs are all about equality, but really, it's really about our oneness. And I love that. And I know Bao emphasized that in his spiritual community writings. So Baba goes on to say, the superiority and inferiority complexes have to be brought into intelligent relation with each other if they are to counteract each other. This requires a situation in which both would be allowed to have their play at the same time without requiring the repression of one in order to express the other. When the soul enters into a dynamic and vital relation with the master, the complex is concerned with the senses of inferiority and superiority are so intelligently accommodated that they counteract each other. The disciple then feels that he is nothing in himself, but in and through the master, he is enlivened by the prospect of being everything. So at one stroke, the two complexes are brought into mutual tension and they tend to annihilate each other. So this is really all about neutralizing these complexes. And I've known for years in my work as a self-inquiry facilitator, if you have one of those complexes, you definitely have the other. So just notice when you notice inferiority complex, then notice superiority complex. And so with the dissolution of these opposite complexes, there comes a breaking down of the separate barriers of the ego in all its forms. With the breaking down of the barriers of separation, there arises divine love. With the arising of divine love, the separate feeling of I, as distinguished from you, is swallowed up in the sense of their unity. So Baba goes on to give the analogy of a driver, which I really find to be so helpful. He says the ego may be compared to a driver who has a certain amount of control over a car and a certain capacity to drive it, but who is in complete darkness about the ultimate destination. For a car to reach its destination, it is not merely enough to have someone who can drive the car. It is necessary that the driver should be able to direct the car toward the destination. As long as the movement of consciousness is under the full and exclusive domination of the ego, the spiritual advancement of the person is jeopardized. The shifting of the center of interest from unimportant things to truly important values is comparable to the transference of power from the ignorant driver to the driver who knows the destination. If the ego were nothing but a medium for the integration of human experience, it would be possible for one to get established in the final truth merely by carrying further the activity of the ego. But while playing a specific part in the progress of consciousness, the ego also represents an active principle of ignorance that prevents further spiritual development. The ego attempts the integration of experience, but it does so around the false idea of separateness. Having taken illusion as the foundation for the construction of its edifice, it never succeeds in anything but the building of illusions. Arriving at the truth is hindered rather than helped by the function of the ego. The process of arriving at the truth can be fruitful only if the integration presided over by the ego is carried further without bringing in the basic ignorance of separateness. So, but the ego as a nucleus for integration has to be renounced. And allegiance and self-surrender to the master, who becomes the new nucleus for integration. So the master becomes the new nucleus of integration. And we can imagine that Baba is taking over this driver's seat in the car of our ego, of our body and our ego. And I love this material because I surrender often to Baba, but there's times when I forget. And this is just that reminder that this is like the most magical and profound gift that we have, being lovers of Baba, that we can just keep asking him to take over. So the master, when truly understood, is a standing affirmation of the unity of all life. Allegiance to the master, therefore, brings about a gradual dissociation from the ego nucleus, which affirms separateness. And I'm just skipping through quite a few pages here to give you some of the key nuggets that I feel complete the work we've done on the ego. I mean, this is like the icing on the cake. So the advancing bankruptcy of the ego does not interfere with the process of integration because the function is now performed around the new center of the master. The intermediate steps of slimming down the ego and softening its nature are comparable to the trimming and pruning of the branches of a wild and mighty tree, while the final step of annihilation of the ego amounts to the complete uprooting of this tree. Isn't that amazing? And now I'm going to just read you a few quotes from his chapter on the dynamics of spiritual advancement. He had a few more things to say about the ego. The aspirant who attempts to reach the goal carries with him all the sanskaras he has accumulated in the past, but in the intensity of his spiritual longing, they remain suspended and ineffective for the time being. The path of spiritual advancement is often blocked by the obstacles of its own creation, and these can be removed only through the help of the master. So, complete self-surrender is most difficult to achieve, and yet the most essential condition of spiritual advancement is the decreasing of egoism to its minimum. The objective of spiritual advancement is not so much works, but the quality of life free from ego consciousness. And this is something that Linda brought up in our last session, that idea that we can do good works, and that's not just it. It's tricky business. And Baba goes on to say, if the aspirant has many great things to his credit that he has claimed as his ego fastens itself upon the achievements, and this constitutes a formidable hindrance to life unlimited. Hence, it is therefore most necessary for the aspirant to keep free from the idea, I do this and I do that. This does not mean that the aspirant is to avoid all activity through fear of developing this form of the ego. He may have to take the life of action to wear out the ego he has already developed. Thus, he is caught up in a dilemma. If he stays inactive, he does nothing to break through the prison of his ego life. And if he takes a life to a life of action, he is faced with the possibility of his ego being transferred to these new acts. So for spiritual advancement, the aspirant has to avoid these two extremes and still carry on a life of creative action. Treading the spiritual path is not like riding a saddled horse, but like walking on the sharp edge of a sword. Once a rider is on horseback, he is practically at rest, sitting with more or less ease and requiring very little effort or attention to proceed. But treading the spiritual path requires utmost attention and carefulness, since the path affords no halting places or room for expansion of the ego life. He who enters the path can neither remain where he is, nor can he afford to lose his balance. So again, Baba says it's like walking on the sharp edge of a sword. So to avoid inaction on the one hand and pride of action on the other, it is necessary for the aspirant to construct in the following manner a provisional and working ego that will be entirely subservient to the master. So before beginning anything, the aspirant thinks that it is not he who is doing it, but the master who is getting it done through him. After doing the task, he does not carry to claim the results of action or enjoy them, but becomes free of them by offering them to the master. By training his mind in this spirit, he succeeds in creating a new ego, which, though only provisional and working, is amply able to become a source of confidence, feeling, enthusiasm, and go that true action must express. This new ego is spiritually harmless, since it derives its life from and being from the master who represents infinity. And when the time comes, it can be thrown away like a garment. There are two types of ego, one that can only add to the limitations of the soul, and the other that helps it toward emancipation. And, I would even say in Jungian psychology, they differentiate, and talk about the healthy ego and the importance, as we discussed last time, of that it's necessary for us to build a healthy ego in the first part of our life so that we have something we can surrender. The passage from the limiting ego of the worldly to the egolessness of infinite life lies through the construction of a provisional ego generated by wholehearted allegiance to the master. So Baba's saying now that the transition from the life of egoistic action to that of egoless action is impossible on one's own, and also not advisable if the aspirant were immediately required to avoid all forms of ego consciousness. He would have to revert to a state of negative passivity without any joy of expression, or he would have to seek expression through activity that is merely automatic, like a lifeless machine. So the real problem is that the aspirant has to abandon the life of the limited ego and enter into the limitlessness of the egoless life without lapsing into a coma. I think it's funny, Baba calls it a coma. I mean, I can relate to all of this, where sometimes I think a spiritual life is very serious and devoid of joy, which is, of course, not true. So Baba says the coma might give temporary relief from the limitation of ego life, but it cannot initiate the aspirant into the infinity of egoless activity. This is the reason why, in most cases, spiritual advancement has to be very gradual and take several lives. When a person seems to have taken long strides, he has merely recapitulated the advancement already secured in previous lives, or there has been special intervention by a Sadguru. In normal cases, the advancement of the aspirant has to be gradual. The distance between the limited life of the ego and the limitlessness of the egoless life has to be covered by gradual stages of ego transformation, so that egoism is replaced by humility. Surging desires are replaced by steadily growing contentment, and selfishness is replaced by selfless love. Okay, I just have a little bit more to read, and then we're going to take some time to just talk about these concepts before we go on to the second part of our session. So when the ego is entirely subservient to the master, it is not only spiritually harmless, but indispensable and directly contributory to the spiritual advancement of the aspirant. The constant inward contact with the master that it secures makes him particularly amenable to the special help that the master alone can give. The aspirant who renounces the life of an uncurbed and separative ego in favor of a life of self-surrender to the master is operating through this new subservient ego as an instrument in the hands of the master. In reality, the master is working through him. Just as an instrument has a tendency to get out of order while being put to use, the aspirant is also likely to go wrong during his working in this world. So from time to time, the instrument has to be cleansed, overhauled, repaired, and set right. In the same way, the aspirant, who during his work has developed new problems, entanglements, and shelters for the personal ego, has to be put in working order before he can move ahead. The aspirant who enlists the service of the master may be compared to a broom with which the master sweeps the world clean of its impurities. The broom is bound to accumulate the dirt of the world, and unless cleansed again and again and given a new tone, it becomes less efficient in the course of time. Each time the aspirant goes to the master, it is with fresh spiritual problems. He might have got caught in new entanglements connected with a craving for honor, riches, or other worldly things that allure man. If he pursues these, he might get them, but he might be far from the goal of experiencing God, on whom he has set his heart. Only through the active intervention of the master can such spiritual orders be cured. The task of curing spiritual diseases is comparable to the performance of an operation by a surgeon who promptly removes the very cause that had been sapping the vital energies of a patient. If a person develops physical ailments and complaints, he must go to the doctor, and if he develops spiritual troubles, he must go to the master. Thus, recurring contact with the master is most necessary throughout the process of spiritual advancement. So those are some of the pearls that Baba has given us on the ego, and the beautiful gift he gives us of the provisional ego, where we give over everything to Baba. So I would just love to open up the floor now and hear your take on everything. Anything you'd like to share?
I could say real quick, I can speak from experience and honestly say that I have felt like 100% like, yeah, today my ego is provisional. Everything's for Baba.
Yeah.
But all of this stuff about it's a recursive and continuous process that really rings true for me. Because I mean, you don't wake up every day for the rest of your life like that when you feel that way. Yeah. You know, so it's not like a one-time thing. Oh, I got my provisional ego. Now I'm
yeah.
a card-carrying Baba lover. No, it's not like that.
I think that is such an important point you're making, Andrew. I loved his analogy to the broom, that if we're really surrendering and, you know, working selflessly, we pick up dirt and we still have to go and get overhauled. And I don't know, that I had forgotten about that. And it really helped me. And also just to remember to let Baba be in the driver's seat. And, you know, but I mean, coming together like this with Baba, you know, this is like a sahabas where we can just renew our efforts and be reminded that all of our trials and tribulations are just part of this path. You know, I mean, Baba's just told us that so clearly. Who else would like to share? Any thoughts you have on this? It's just, you know.
Well, I liked hearing the part about having the phrase, the master is getting it done through me, or something like that. I thought that was pretty a good reminder. It's an efficient way of being okay with whatever you're doing.
Yeah. And in my experience, sometimes I have to say that over and over again, you know. It's like it's an ongoing practice. But it does get easier. And then, of course, stuff happens and the broom needs to get overhauled. Do I see your hand, Rosalie? No?
It's not raised. No, it has holding my teacup.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I also
right.
I was tuning in a lot when you were reading about the difference between equality and unity and how beautifully he describes that, because that's such a concept to grasp,
I think that particular teaching is so important because equality is comparing, which is one of the subterfuges of the ego. To even say I'm superior or I'm inferior or I'm equal to you, those are still all comparisons. But to really honor the fact that actually we're all one, I just love that. And sometimes I forget, but we really are. We're all one. And it's the most beautiful, it's just the most beautiful awareness. And I think when one part of the body of God suffers, you know, we all suffer. I think we all share in the suffering of the world. And, you know, we have our particular sanskars that are coming up, but, you know, Baba's certainly given us the example of being open to suffering for the pain of the world. And I think it helps me a lot to have that awareness. So would anybody else like to make any comments, or before we go on to our second part of the anima and the animus? Okay.
I do want to say something.
Okay.
It's from Baba's mystical language that I am so drawn to and nourished by, really. And this one particular one, this was in one of the Mayor Baba journals, and it's called God Has to Be Manifested. And it says, I love remembering this every day. See me live in you in small ways of life, the everyday ritual of selfless harmony. The unsatisfied element in you is God, who needs you to be like him. Unsatisfied humor is God when winning in you the dual show of I. I am the motive making I, to lift in I the truth. God is realization, manifestation in I. I am one in all. See me giving you the order to resign in self-importance. I am in you the truth, creating you dual in humble ways of I. Lift in the I that is me.
Thank you, Rosalie. Yeah, the mystical language. Okay, so I just got a text from Doug and he didn't have the password, so I just texted it to him. So hopefully he'll be able to get in soon. Well, we're going to start on the anima and the animus. And this is the third developmental archetype in Carl Jung's cosmology, I guess you could say. So I'm going to share notes from the website appliedjung.com, which is an excellent source of material if anybody's interested. I'm going to give you some notes on this, and then I'm going to share notes from another source, and then, you know, I hope we can have a lively discussion. This material in the anima and animus has been really incredible for me to be studying these last 2 weeks, and I have gone through some real soul searching and changes through my awareness of some of my own animus, particularly issues that I recognize through studying this. So, you know, until we're enlightened, I think we're all trying to balance the anima, the animus. So the shadow that we studied last week is largely personal. Integrating the shadow helps us to expand our personality and incorporate aspects of the personal self into consciousness. The anima and the animus are further from consciousness than the shadow, and as such, perform the function in the psyche as the bridge between the ego and the collective unconscious. The integration of anima and animus brings aspects of the archetypal other into consciousness. So this is farther away from consciousness than our personal shadow. And the ideas that Carl Jung developed came from working actively with his clients at the time. And the point is made that, you know, at that time, like the turn of the century, the roles of men and the women were quite different than they are today. And so he, at the time, saw that men who were very masculine had underdeveloped feeling and relational abilities. The classic masculine tendencies of reason and logic were dominant in these men, but their relational qualities like emotional relatedness, intuition, and feelings were repressed. So it was more polarized in the past than it is today. And so men tended to project their anima or all their feminine energies onto their partner. And then the partner would project all her masculine energies onto her partner. And so, but there was still incompleteness because, of course, we're looking for the integration. So he says these men were usually in relationships with women that contained and carried those expressions of the feeling life freely. It was as if the man carried some qualities and the woman carried others. So together they contained all aspects. Unfortunately, this resulted in men who were severed from their own feelings, and consequently, they were frequently moody, sulky, childish, threw tantrums, and generally not able to access and process their own feelings. Women, on the other hand, were unable to access an understanding and clear thinking about the rules and structures in the world, and often relegated this function to their husbands. So these experiences made Jung realize that there are archetypal masculine qualities and archetypal feminine qualities. And he called the feminine archetype the anima and the masculine archetype the animus. So this internal image is projected out onto the world and finds a suitable individual who can carry those qualities for us. So this model has been adjusted by the post-Jungians to be more in line with modern expression of gender and sexuality, but it still contains many valid ideas. So notice the type of person you might be attracted to and what are those specific qualities. This is your internal image of the other or the opposite, which lives within you. Integrating the anima and the animus is accessing these qualities that lie within you and bringing them into consciousness. And I have definitely found in my own life, if I noticed that I felt an attraction, let's say to a man, and I'm married, and I had studied Jungian psychology, I could contemplate what is it in that person that attracts me. And then I found that I could work on integrating and developing that quality in myself. And it's always worked. It's like I'm able to withdraw the projection and then integrate it and assimilate it. Because just as we've talked about before, Baba says we project the world, and then the unconscious has to project in order to become conscious. And then to withdraw the projections is how we slowly become self-realized. So let's see. So in the contemporary version, post-Jungians definitely focus more on integrating the anima and animus in each individual. And Jung described the archetype of the anima as life, access to the numinous, and the archetype of the animus as meaning. As anima governs the relationship with the body and feeling function, the bridge to the internal experience is through anima. Integrate, and this is for all of us. So our inner life, our going within, that's the function of the anima, the female principle. Integrating the anima is connecting to our bodies, our feeling life, our intuition and creativity. The animus is the bridge to the external world, to ideas, structure, rules, and implementation. So the integration of the anima and animus is the process of moving inwards and accessing our internal reality, and then moving outwards and connecting our internal experience to the external reality and the expression of our authentic self in the external world, bringing the unique aspects of ourselves and manifesting this in the external world. So guidelines to identifying where our dysfunctionalities are, and I believe part of the human experience is that we all have some level of dysfunctional anima or animus. So if the animus is turned outwards to the world, when it's supposed to be turned inwards, there will be dysfunction. If the animus is turned inwards instead of towards the world, this will also be experienced as dysfunction. And so we're going to talk about the dysfunctional anima. And of course, remember, there's a full spectrum of developmental stages, from extreme poverty of richness to just nuances of needing to become aware of some of our dysfunctions. So they call it being possessed by the anima when our anima is dysfunctional. So because the anima discovers the relatedness to the body, our feeling life, our intuition and creativity, when it's turned towards the external world instead of inward, we experience poor body relatedness. Our feeling function is sidelined by external ideas of how we should feel and behave. And I can certainly relate to that. Even though as a self-inquiry facilitator, I support clients in connecting to their body, I am aware that I don't always pay attention to the messages that my body's giving me. And the study I've been doing on anima and animus is really helping me to pay more attention, like 24/7. What does my body need now? What do I need to feel right now? So our feeling function is sidelined by external ideas of how we should feel and behave. It also manifests as a lack of creativity and an overall ability to relate to other people. The anima-possessed individual is passive and melancholic. Jung identified a key element to a dysfunctioning anima being moods. So when a person is possessed or overwhelmed by moods, they are not able to access their feelings or identify their feelings accurately. They're just feeling a bad mood. It could be sadness, fear, anger, or any specific emotion. It can be expressed as sulky, nagging behavior. And we're not usually aware of our body's responses. So we get disconnected from our feeling life. And of course, the challenge is to just sit with those uncomfortable feelings. And as I've said before, neuroscientists have discovered that something will shift within 60 to 90 seconds. And I find great comfort in that, because I do believe that with all the sanskaras that we're trying to balance out, we have to feel a lot of negativity, but it doesn't last. And there's a healing that arises. So I really appreciated the awareness that if my anima is turned outwards, I lose my contact with my body. I get moody because I'm not accessing my feelings. The functioning anima, a functional and integrated anima, allows the individual to be centered and have a contained and validated inner life. They are creative, empathetic, and can self-soothe and nurture themselves. The functioning anima can make value judgments that are authentic and personally empowering. Then we have access to our feeling life. We're effective communicators and able to relate to others. We can be warm, kind, loving, and caring. When the animus, okay, so that's the functioning anima. Now we're going to talk about the dysfunctioning animus. So if the animus discovers our relatedness to the external world, when it's dysfunctional and turned inwards rather than outwards, it expresses itself in opinions. Knowledge and understanding are approached through feeling, since the animus is turned inwards. And it's not supposed to be turned inwards. So the animus possessed individual is insecure and often argumentative, dogmatic, and judgmental. They are closed-minded and try to bully others into agreeing with their ideas. They can be highly opinionated and know-it-all. They quote information as if it is fact without having done objective investigations or research. So isn't it interesting that when the function of the animus is turned inwards rather than outwards, it covers the intellectual and logos capacity with emotions and feelings, and it's supposed to be separated. So when the animus is functioning, it governs the relationship with the external world, and it results in an individual who is self-assured and self-possessed because they feel secure in their position in the world. They understand the structure and rules of their environment. They can think clearly about ideas without getting emotional. They are proactive and excel in leadership. And when I'm sharing this information, please don't make it black and white. There's so many shades of gray in this whole anima, animus, dysfunction and function. And just notice, this is what I've been doing. I have been able to notice where I'm dysfunctional. And then you can't beat yourself up. You're just like, okay, I'm just a witness. I'm gathering information, which is really an animus function. So we all have an anima and animus, and with these guidelines, it's possible to identify where they're functioning well or where they need help. So the anima and animus are lenses or bridges with which to approach the internal and external reality. So it is important to work with them and integrate them in order to achieve a balanced and healthy attitude towards both our internal and external worlds. And of course, I think of Baba, the perfect man. And he said in this Advent specifically, he's the father and the mother. And, he talked about he's as hard as steel and as soft as butter. And he could flow like all the time between the feminine and the masculine. And I really like to remember that, and it helps me recognize what an integrated being, how that looks. It's so loving and beautiful and feminine, and at the same time strong with all the masculine qualities. And we're just so fortunate, to have Baba as our perfect symbol image of that balance. So to just share a little more about the shadow anima and animus, we project our inner anima and animus onto our intimate partners. The psyche wants to be whole and experience wholeness, so it will attract to itself that which lies within the unconscious. Usually we identify in our persona with a specific archetype. We are either more anima or more animus in our persona, so the projection onto the other is opposite. And I would also say it's not just with our intimate partner, because for people who don't have a partner, it's also just with whoever is important in our lives. And we can really work with the projections that we have with those others. So this is not gender specific. So men could be more anima and women could be more animus. For example, a woman with more animus qualities would attract a man with more anima qualities and vice versa. And this is also true for people in the LGBT community. So because they're associated in pairs, they also have constructive and destructive qualities. And these get projected onto our significant others, and I would say to whoever crosses our path. So to integrate the shadow anima and animus, the parental dynamic has a profound impact on our relationship dynamics. So these parental dynamics and the wounds that we carry from them will revisit us in our relationships. And I know from the self-inquiry work I do, the core work is always working on the father and the mother. And ultimately, we just come to see that these were the parents we were given, and we let them off the hook. and we become the parent we're waiting for. So the integration of shadow, anima, and animus requires the same process of shadow work to identify these qualities and find where we express them within ourselves. It is important to note that projection is not necessarily that we have that quality, but rather that this quality caused the wound. So in this case, shadow work would entail making a conscious experience of the wound, the effect and influence it has on our relatedness to ourselves, our beliefs about ourselves, and making these aspects conscious. So Jung had said that the inner woman and man can become more whole by accessing the unconscious mind. The anima represents the unconscious mind. And today we know it's the feminine side of every person, a conglomerate of all feminine traits. I'm just recircling the same material that I just presented in a slightly different way, because I think it helps us hear it differently. And then after this, we'll have our time to talk about it. So when both sides are integrated, a relationship comes about to have clarity and connection to the unconscious. And so that we're talking about within our own beings, where we have the connection to our unconscious, and then we have the clarity, which is the animus function, to relate to the world. So because anima and animus have a deeper archetypal nature than the shadow, they belong inside of us, and our goal is to withdraw the projections. So the shadow anima has autonomy with its own wants and needs. It's like an inner woman who lives in a shadow trying to get her needs met. And tactics to bring connection could be projecting on a person who can take on the image of that shadow aspect, believing somehow this person is going to complete us. So that's always the red flag when we're doing shadow work. No one can complete us. We can complete ourselves. And especially with Baba, we know that that's true. And as we spoke about it last time, it's described differently in different world religions. It's the mystical marriage, and it's the lover beloved in Sufism, and it's the Shiva Shakti relationship. These are all internal. This is our inner work. So a repressed anima could be trying to get conscious personality to integrate with it, trying to gain a sense of empowerment. Repression brings feelings of powerlessness. So this is when the anima can become vengeful. The more intense these symptoms are, there can be a debilitating sense of being kept in a cage by an internal woman. It feels like the way it looks, then it feels like attacking external women, but it's really internal, and it becomes cyclical. The more one pushes away the anima, the more the anima possesses, and then the more it is projected on women as a whole. Anima disintegration is a barrier to personal growth. So the benefits of integrating the anima include internal harmony, more access and discernment relative to emotions, more connection to instincts and personal sovereignty, because all of that is emotionally led, and that is the core of the anima. The anima enables one to follow intuition more and have more intimacy in all relationships. Now, the masculine in all of us can push the anima away because of fear that it will diminish it. The more aware we are of these dynamics, the more mature personality becomes. Any repression brings denigrated expression of personality. Integrating anima is like soil that masculinity can grow in. So to integrate the anima, we can examine things that we associate with the feminine and notice any resistance or aversion. Why is the resistance there? For example, open emotional expression. We could have been shamed as a child for having our emotions invalidated. So when we explore and find the root cause, they dissolve. So we see, in order to find this balance, we must be able to access our emotions. They are absolutely necessary for us to navigate our lives. What are the fears regarding the anima? One fear is the belief that femininity equals weakness and therefore disempowerment. And this causes repression of femininity. We can find ways to dispel fears by learning more about the feminine principle and see it as a source of empowerment. We can develop a deeper relationship with anima by getting in touch with emotions and personal sovereignty through connection with the body, the feminine principle. So we go from the mind, the masculine principle, down into the emotions and the body. The healthy anima shows compassion and is emotionally intelligent. Now I'm going to describe some stages of development as the anima, what it looks like when it's less developed and then as it gets more developed. And this is material taken from the diamondnet.org. And I found a lot of this material to be very accessible and also had some spiritual overtones with it. So without integration, we will be possessed by anima, which can manifest at its worst as seeing women as sexual objects, as well as having a lack of direction in life. And I can see, even as being a woman myself, I can even see where there have been times in my life where I could see women as sexual objects. So I could be projecting that out and, being angry about it. So that's a very low stage of development. With more development, we can do things in the world, but there is a lack of imagination, heart, and creativity. With further development, one can see the feminine as having free agency, but women are seen more dualistically as only virtuous. So the relationship with anima is decent, but not fully formed. There is still no access to the unconscious mind. And I think we could see this in some religions where a woman would be put on a pedestal as only virtuous, which is a rather, dimensionless way of looking at a woman. When the anima is fully integrated, it is seen as the embodiment of wisdom. We'll see the anima as partner, a fully fleshed individual. We will have access to the unconscious mind, and we're able to apply logos, reason, to eros, resulting in enhanced creativity. If the anima is not integrated, it goes into the shadow and it gets dense. It manifests as moody, sulky, irrational, cannot set goals or realize them, feelings of misogyny, issues with mother, partner, sisters, disconnected from emotions, lack of commitment, chaos, confusion. When it's integrated, it's accepting it values and honors emotions as valid. Emotions don't go away when we ignore them. We develop ourselves internally through introspection. We develop nurturing, loving side. It can help to talk to a woman, including older ones and little girls, to see them as individuals. When integrated, the anima is like adding salt to a dish to enhance the flavor. So now we're going to talk about the animus one more time. So Jung said connecting to the animus supports the ability to discern messages of the conscious mind. So when both are integrated, there is the ability to convert emotions / intuition, anima, into articulation, animus. And again, in Jung's day, he was defining these in relation to gender, but we are seeing it as an internal process. Shadows have autonomy from the conscious self. Unintegrated animus also has autonomy, its own agenda, although the animus is more archetypal, masculine in nature. When we're cut off from the animus, it behaves in a ruthless way. Animus repression, lack of individuation, sublimation into the group, vagueness, lack of discipline, indecision, lack of direction, inability to make sense of emotions, disconnection from personal sovereignty, looking to external authority, inability to see the big picture. So these are all animus repressions. Tends to be related to what social group expects of us. Inordinate desire to stay connected to the group can stand in the way of individuation. And of course, in Jungian psychology, individuation is actually another word for becoming whole. Jung talked about the self with a capital S, and he knew that that was the goal of life. And so to heal, we can work on developing our own perspective, practice setting boundaries, and get in touch with negative feelings. When the animus is possessed, there is an overbearing quality. Being armored, one is disconnected from emotions and instincts, disconnection from the body, being in the head, shutting down, overworking, not accepting help, extreme independence, never being vulnerable, aggressive or passive aggressive behavior, isolation, rebellion without cause, seeing men as extension of animus. For example, being on a treadmill of work, never resting. And then collective reason, we live in a society that values masculine principles more, doing, forward movement, ideas, working, whereas feminine values include stillness, being, creativity, existing. To integrate the possessing animus, we can look at what we're trying to protect ourselves from at the root cause. Go into the uncomfortable feelings. The animus development brings direction in life. So the animus is to give us direction in our life. When the animus is undeveloped, it is possessed. One has to know everything. Therefore, rigid opinions instead of assertiveness, also aggressiveness, constant judgment, interjects views and is dogmatic, out of touch with emotions, and therefore not able to have relationships because of blocked emotions. Now we'll go through the stages of development for the animus. When it's not developed, there is attraction to physical power, but with a lack of control in life. It manifests as looking for a strong partner to protect oneself. When our animus is more developed, the attraction would be more to a partner of action or romance who can set forward plans and we follow along. With further development, the animus is seen as a person of words, like a professor or an orator. At this stage of animus development, a woman or anima can assert her own worldviews. She can make things happen, but she does not quite have the connection to animus as the mediator between the conscious and the unconscious. A fully developed persona and ego can take the animus, can take their animus down into the feminine wellspring of unconscious mind and manifest from that place, bringing creativity into fruition. And again, the image of the perfect man, Baba, arises for me. Think about his life, how he was always going into seclusion and going into the depths. I mean, who knows what he was doing, but I imagine that he was going into the depths of the unconscious and healing and supporting us all to awaken, and then manifesting, bringing creativity into fruition. I mean, his words and his discourses and his speech are incredible. I mean, I'm always just, my jaw drops, you know, when I read his words. I've just never seen anything like it. So we need a clear sense of what our values are and of course, Baba stresses the importance of true values. Then we experience more individuation, independence, autonomy, self-agency. Ultimately, we go beyond all these dualities of anima and animus and focus on authenticity, because we don't want to get stuck in either polarity. And so I imagine kind of a figure-8 flow between the unconscious and the conscious, and that there's just this beautiful interchange that is going on. We need to own our inner opposite traits, and we are actually psychologically androgynous. So I think it's really helpful to see ourselves as androgynous beings. I've done that a lot in my life, and I feel like there's great value in not identifying as man or woman always. I think it's very limiting. So when we reject, we project. So the animus and the anima are part of the ancestral memory from our internal unconsciousness. When fully integrated, they are mediators between the conscious and the unconscious mind. Now, as a society, we're more yang or masculine polarized. We haven't explored the depth and breadth of yin values as a society. And I definitely find that true in my own life. As I've been evaluating the yang and the yin qualities, I can see where my work is. And when we open it up for discussion, I will share about that, and I would love to hear everyone's thoughts. So I'm just going to read a list of yin and yang qualities that we can just listen to and take note of. And in order to be psychologically whole, we can work on integrating these qualities. So the yang qualities are external, doing, purpose, goal setting, enacting an agenda, personal agency, autonomy, rationality, logic, intellect, logos, individuality, transformation, change, stoicism, analytical, prowess, discernment, action, commitment. So some of the yin or feminine qualities would be internal, being rather than doing, awareness of the present moment, connection to the unconscious, embracing paradox, cognitive dissonance, exploring the mysterious, the non-rational, eros, nurturing, caring, connection to wisdom, emotional intelligence, unconditional love, respect for the earth and its creatures, dark, mysterious stillness. So that's what I have to share with you today. And I just would love to have a conversation with you on all of this. And I'll share with you some of what I discovered also. Maybe I'll do that first and break the ice. I'm always happy to out myself. So and the thing that's so amazing is that as I studied this material in the last 2 weeks, I had several significant incidences arise in my life. And what I saw, and I'll just share one, a friend from the past who I hadn't seen for 5 years, I would say, and we were very close, and she had just dropped away. And another friend was over visiting the other day, and she just mentioned her name, and I said, well, how is she? And, I just don't understand what happened. And she said, well, she told me what happened, but you'll just have to ask her yourself. So I did. And it was so amazing. So the situation was that this was probably 5 years ago. So my son used to give kirtans, spiritual singing at our house. And I would say, and we used to do it upstairs where we live. And then over time, he moved it downstairs where he was living. He had kind of made a bachelor apartment in the basement. And I found it to be challenging for me to have a lot of people walking through the house and then going downstairs. And so we had made, the instructions were just go through the downstairs entrance. And I could remember a few things that had happened at some of the kirtans that had disturbed me. I mean, just for example, I would serve tea, and I have really nice teacups, and this one lady broke like my favorite teacup, and it, I felt kind of dishonored. So anyway, what happened was when my dear friend came to the upstairs door, she hadn't gotten the message, I guess. She said, I was so cold and authoritarian. And I told her that, to go downstairs, go down and use the other entrance. And I realized that was Animus. And I know what it was. It wasn't anything to do with my friend. It was to do with the fact that I was feeling vulnerable and unsafe because of certain situations that were going on. And so I wasn't fully present for her when she came. So I deeply apologized to her and asked her to please forgive me. And, and that I've been working on myself, like forever. And she was able to, and she said, I forgive you and I forgive myself. And, she was really happy, and she noticed that the sun had just come out right at the time we were texting, and, and then, but even a few other things happened over these last few weeks as I really applied myself, and I could recognize how I can be harsh. And especially when I was doing the work of Byron Katie, I worked a lot on that, and I have improved a lot, but I still have that quality. And I actually see that because of the civilization we live in and the era we live in, which is so oriented toward masculine values, I feel like sometimes it's an uphill struggle to manifest the feminine values that I so love. And so I really work at that. I really work at honoring like the homemaking that I do, and the gardening and the cooking. And these are things I love. And yet I could feel the projections, maybe just from the general world, that they're not necessarily valued. I mean, even my children, I think it was 12 years ago, and I was 60, and I got certified as a facilitator of the work. And my children were so happy that I finally had a job. I was busy all the time, creating a home, creating harmony, hosting events. And I'm just saying that I think this is one of the things that most of us at least, have to really recognize, that it's so pervasive in our world today to not honor the feminine aspects of being. And then, of course, I think of beloved Mara, and I got up really early this morning and I watched the birthday celebration for Mara, and it was so perfect because she is so utterly feminine, and yet when I hear the stories of people who knew her, she was strong, she was clear as crystal. You get all these nuances about her that you might not know until you really get chances to find out about her life. Okay, enough from me. I hope somebody else will share. I really feel like this is important work, Anima Animus.
I'll share my impressions.
Thank you.
Okay, so I grew up probably different than you a little bit, because my impression of femininity has always been like, femininity is good, strong, good. I was thoroughly steeped in second wave feminism and raised by a single mom and surrounded by strong women all the time. So like, I just get exhausted by this language of like, yin is weak and feminine, blah, blah, blah. Like it's very 20th century, like, can we get past it? I think Meher Baba's language was more progressive in this way, where he talks more about how it's good and bad sanskaras or extremes, one under the other, but he's not constantly gendering everything like Jung did, like Freud did. I mean, like, we just need to, I part of this shadow work for me is identifying where and how the gendering stuff bothers me and
Yeah.
why does that bother me? Maybe it's
Yeah.
because it's been imposed on me so much, and from a young age, like, man, I think I got through these hurdles. Like, do I have to really hold everyone's hand through this again and again? And I mean, part of it is, yes, we all do, it's a collective activity, but I like this material so much. I like Jung's shadow work. I like everything about it except this, I don't know what it is. I guess it's a little bit chauvinistic, I guess, is his attitude. And I like to take to the Gen Z crowd has reminded us all how misgendering things really is a problem in our culture. So, like, let's take a look at that. Let's take a look at the language. That's my impression.
Well,
okay.
I just want to respond. I
Yes.
thought I made it clear that we're doing post-Jungian work, and that when he was practicing, because of the traditional roles at the time and the people who were coming to him who had issues, he noticed, you know, the animus. It was more polarized. But in the material that I presented, I thought I made it clear that this is all inner. We have inner man and inner woman. And you said the feminine being weak, but that is not a quality that, I mean, it was certainly not on the list that I said. The qualities that I read were all positive qualities for both,
well,
masculine and feminine.
There's more of a subtle, I'm just talking about the more subtle implications of this body of literature. And I've seen the yin yang kind of thing deployed in the Jungian context in ways that I don't even think he would approve of. Like, I just don't think that's quite it. The yin, and I mean, I'm not objecting to the way you presented it. No, well, I'm not objecting to the way you presented it. I'm just trying to say that for me, the work is to try to integrate this more with Meher Baba's language that has less to do with this early modern era, like, grappling with gender. I mean, that's not like, that's not spiritual work for me anymore. That's just like, I'm being patient with people, and a lot of younger people feel the same way. Like, this is not that important. We need to identify the parts that are, and we do need to all have little parts in our shadow selves that correspond to those holy places in human consciousness, like the mythic pantheons that we need to connect with the divine in ourselves. Yes, but to say like doing the dishes is a feminine activity and there's something, I have to be like, whoa, stop. That's all. Okay.
It kind of is, because you go inside, you go in a way. But I think using masculine and feminine can be kind of off-putting at this point, and maybe just the opposites, the nature of it being like an archetype of opposites going on inside of us might be, or right.
For some reason, I'm bothered by it. That's all. I'm gonna stop.
No, I'm glad you said everything you've said. And what comes up for me is I still witness so many of us have moods. And I think studying the Anima and Animus helps me understand what to do when there's a sulky or moody nature. And I see it in incredibly intelligent people. It happens all the time. And the imbalance, when the animus is overbalanced, it can be harsh and ruthless. And I mean, that's just so prevalent in our world, and maybe not in the Baba world for sure, but I still need to be able to understand the projected consensus reality out there. And when I look at it through the lens of Anima and Animus, it just is so, it just helps me. But that's me, it would be different for everyone. Anybody else? Or if you have anything else to say on that, Andrew, you know.
Well, I totally want to agree with what you just said. I mean, it helps me too. And anima and animus doesn't necessarily have to be everything's, you know, yin and yang or feminine, masculine. I mean, I think we were talking about it last session, how it's more these extreme states of our little wave functions that are quirky and make up our shadow or whatever, our ego even sometimes. Like, you know, think of it like that if you want, however you want. We don't have to put these cultural balls and chains on them so much, I don't think, anymore. Like, we could use more new agey kind of Baba gave us some pretty good new agey language that's good. It goes more in this direction, and it's still very much in this spirit of Jung's, of what Jung's trying to get at.
Can you just give me some examples so I understand what you're saying?
Well, when he talks about sanskaras,
Okay.
you know, I mean, he's talking about things that like animal sanskaras. Maybe some of these are good, like a mother's instinct to care for her children. You know, I mean, we get this from our animal incarnations.
Sure.
So these are good, but you know, you have to integrate it with the bad ones too, as Meher Baba calls them, good and bad. Like,
Yeah.
And he even says these aren't really, good and bad aren't very useful terms. So imagine how he would feel about feminine, masculine being good terms. I mean, that's the thing. Like, it's just like he doesn't want to put labels on it, but there's got to be some constructive way to talk about it. So he's given us this set of vocabulary terms to talk about this stuff. So it's, I don't know, like, I'm just going to try to look more and more at reading Jung through how would Meher Baba like interpret this with his little hand gestures. Like, he's probably not going to talk about aprons and stuff so much. I don't
Well, yeah, I mean, I certainly didn't mean to portray those kind of dichotomies. I feel like, for instance, the yin being internal, being awareness of the present moment, as opposed to goal setting. I mean, these are universal qualities, I think. And you know, Baba himself said he's both father and mother. So there's the archetypes right there. I don't know. I don't know. But I'm really glad that you brought it up. You know, I just found personally, as I reviewed this material, I could see I got some more awareness of my own imbalances. And it's not like a huge thing, but you know, I find that as I'm on this journey with Baba and I want to get rid of everything that keeps me from being closer to him, it's really helpful, for instance, to see what I did and to be able to, with my friend, and to be able to ask for forgiveness and just recognize that I still have that tendency. It's just an old tendency to be cold. She said I was cold and authoritarian and harsh. And to me, that would be an animus qualities, you know, whereas the disintegrated anima would be different. I mean, anyway, and in the end, there is no duality. In the end, it all gets integrated and it's just all one. And so I guess for me, I'm at the stage of development where I still have to look at some of these opposites and notice how they play out in my own being. Yeah. Does anybody else have any thoughts?
I'd like to say something.
Thank you, Mona.
It was very insightful, I think, from the beginning to now, and it just brought up a lot while you were just reading, and I could just connect to different parts of my life, and you know, it brought up some instances which I could, you know, see what was happening, and even I could see the dynamics between my mom and dad and how they were, you know, acting out at each other, like my mom and my dad, and when you said about those two things, I could just see it. And okay, so this is what's happened. This is how she is, and this is how he is, and that's what they're doing. And it was interesting to just hear it. I mean, I'm living with them, but it just gives me a different perspective to it.
Yeah. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for sharing that.
And it's not that I'm not aware of what's happening, but I could just correlate with it. Yeah.
Yeah. And I find that just knowing the dynamic helps diffuse the energy. Like, as I could see my own inner dynamic with that cold authoritarian animus, it's not like I'm punishing myself. I'm just going, oh, there that is. And now I can be more mindful. I can be more careful.
Yeah.
And if you see a dynamic with your parents, it's like, oh, that's what that is. It just kind of makes it easier somehow. Just to understand it.
Yeah. And even when you spoke about in the first half about the ego and all of that, it was very interesting to hear the way you just put it across. It was really nice. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm so happy you came. She's here like at 2 a.m. from Mumbai. Oh.
I do want to agree. I love the quotes that you picked out. So thank you.
Good. Oh, it was hard. I don't like to give too many quotes, but I tell you, I get so excited. It's like, but I have to keep studying, and somehow doing the Zoom sessions keeps me in it more, and so I'm always so grateful for whoever shows up just to, share our journey. Yeah.
Now, I heard one thing that Baba's sister Mani said one day, and it really rang. I really liked it. She says, Baba gives us the highest authority. He gives us the authority to love him. And that's very meaningful to me.
Yes. I mean, it's kind of like, we love him because he loved us first. It's always his grace. It's the incredible mystery, isn't it? We're so fortunate. Yeah. All right, Miss Diantha. You must have something to add.
Well, thank you for reading to us and for choosing those quotes. And it's just so nice to be read to.
Oh, good.
I just appreciated it. I have been reading a little bit from this book, which I can share more about later, but I wanted to quickly just read this one sentence about, this is the way that these concepts are, I'll admit, a little hard for me to grasp, but I do appreciate having some symbolism for the opposites that are the way that this author, who I'll describe in a minute, let me just read this. The actualization of the opposite warring aspects of the archetypes in the ego-self relationship is through the bridge of the transcendent or symbolic function in the context of the body and in relation to other people. So it just helps me to just think of these archetypes, the animus and the anima, especially as warring archetype, like as kind of opposites that we're trying to iron out. And so Jung did say the realization of the opposites hidden in the unconscious. The process of reversal signifies reunion with the unconscious laws of our being. And the purpose of this reunion is the attainment of conscious life. So that's, in a nutshell. Like I think he was on the right track in that.
Yes, yes.
It helped me to have some kind of symbols to grab onto when there's all this, stuff going on internally, and whether it be sun and moon, or
Yeah.
right brain, left brain. There's definitely two different and maybe we can't all agree on what would be listed under each one, but masculine and feminine has been kind of the old school way of
Yeah.
working, and that does probably need to evolve, and it is, like you said in your presentation.
Yeah.
So.
But I also appreciate that you and Andrew are a different generation than I am. And so it's really healthy to bring in, this youthful energy. I love that. And I do want to say that the next session is the fourth archetype that Jung talked about, which is the self with a capital S. And so hopefully there'll be a lot of integration. But I mentioned this right when at 2:00, or, when we started. I'm going away for a while, and I won't be doing these sessions. I don't know when I'm going to start up again, but and for those of you who I have your emails, I can let you know. But if you want me to let you know, my email address is Anne with an E at kindreality.com. And then I'll just let you know, I'm going to be visiting my son and his wife for a month down in Mexico. I'm going to get some warm weather. So I'm going to study and just heal. I'm going to just have I'm going to get the broom cleaned.
Yeah.
I thought about that. Baba's going to clean the broom. I need to go get reoriented and recycled and all of that. And so I'm just so grateful to be able to have shared these 3 sessions that we've had, but we do have to move on and do the self, and we'll see what arises out of that, because of course that can just be all Baba. I think there's good material that the post-Jungians have on the self, but I haven't had time to study it yet. So I'm going to take my work with me on vacation. And does anybody else have anything? We have to close here real soon.
What was your, it was Anne with an E at Kind Reality?
Yes, .com. And so if you email me, then I will let you know when I'm ready to start again. I'm planning to do it. I just need it to be open-ended. So.
I guess that's okay.
Oh, thank you. I need a vacation. I just want to thank you, each and every one, for just coming together and having this opportunity to have this sharing. And thank you, beloved Baba. So, adieu.
Tar Meher Baba Ki Jai.
Thank you so much.